All right, good morning, folks. It is Friday in my world, probably not Friday in your world by the time that you watch this. Um, got my COVID shot yesterday and my second one. So as of yet, I'm not growing any third appendages, but it feels like one might sprout out right under that injection site. But things are going well. As promised, I wanted to do this video for you guys just to walk you through the essay that you have due next Wednesday at noon, because we will not have a class Monday or Tuesday because I am out. So I've tried to get everything very organized so I can make this as concise and meaningful as possible. So bear with me. Now I am doing one video for both classes. And so this is the only difference I want to note. So my block ones have already written an essay. So I'm going to mention some things I saw with that, so I can kind of help everyone in this upcoming week of things to avoid. So when you hear me referencing the first essay, that's what was written by the first block. And I'm just using it as a reference point to say, these are the problems I'm seeing in writing, and this is how you fix them, because it'll help everyone. And then the second difference will be academic students, you guys have one prompt. DC students have 3. So toward the end of this tutorial, I'll say, okay, that's it for block 2 academics. Everything else is for DC. And then you'll know if you're in my block 2 class, you can just stop watching it there because the rest of the video will discuss prompts that don't apply to you. All right. So I hope that is a way to make it meaningful and useful for all of us without me recording 2 videos, because I really want to make sure I cover everything in this one video. Okay, and I'm doing like several pauses as I'm opening up the new settings on this new laptops to get everything to be able to record. So if things seem like they're cutting out and they're jerky, it's just because I'm pausing recording and doing some things and coming back to again try to make this as concise and meaningful, those are today's buzzwords, for you guys as possible. So I'm looking at block 1 class here, but it's going to be the same, that looks the same as about what block 2 will see, with the exception of one document. So if we go into the folder for next week, and there's going to be 2, we'll worry about poetry come Wednesday. But the folder for Monday is everything for the essay. So you'll have directions, and then you'll have the actual assignment where you're going to type it and turn it in. Block 2, you won't see the prompts because again, you only have one, and we'll discuss that in a second. All right, before we get to that though, I want to visit this section of your classroom. Under writing resources, and my plan is to add to this as the semester goes on. And one of the things I think I'm going to do is add a couple of examples of student writing. So with each assignment, just taking a couple of examples of good products and putting it in there so you guys can see what your peers are doing. And maybe that's a good point of reference, but not until after the assignment because we know how that goes. So right here is something that we unfortunately, apparently need to visit. This is a slide that I begin 10th grade English with. So all but a very few of you would have seen it, although it would have looked a little different back then. But we've forgotten some of these things. And I don't know if we've forgotten because, you know, the COVID slide, or maybe they weren't reinforced since our parting and our reunion. But in looking at the first set of essays from my college composition class, I've definitely saw some very problematic writing on simple things. So let's revisit these simple things. Number one, a well-developed paragraph, and you'll see that abbreviation WDP, refers to, in an essay, what would be a body paragraph. So an introduction and a conclusion are a little different, but a body paragraph should be about 8 sentences. You may occasionally have a smaller paragraph if you have a very specific point, but it's not going to have a lot of elaboration and development, but it's such a unique point that it needs its own paragraph. And it's so important that you don't want to leave it out. So you may have a very rare 5-sentence paragraph, but by the time you have a topic sentence and a clincher, you make your argument, you've only left yourself a couple of sentences to develop and support it. That's not the level of writing we're doing in 12th grade. So in an essay, a fully developed essay, most of your body paragraphs are going to be about 8 sentences. Now, if they're exceeding 12, you got too much going on. You need to go back and look at how can I slice that into 2 paragraphs, you know, and how do I take this one big idea and break it into 2 sub ideas? Because we are not doing cookie cutter 5-paragraph essays. So you don't need to fit all your ideas into 3 body paragraphs. Your essays may be 5 paragraphs, they may be 4, they may be 7. Your paragraphs are determined by how many ideas you're going to develop and support to prove your thesis. With me? Okay, so a well-developed paragraph always begins with a topic sentence. A topic sentence is specific. If it is written well, I could not peel that sentence off and stick it on any other paragraph in your paper or someone else's. And I should be able to go through your essay and read just the first sentence of each paragraph and know everything you're going to write about. So in that paragraph, the main idea and how it will be supported should be written in that very first sentence of that paragraph. We are not doing narrative writing. We are not doing creative writing. You are not trying to draw your reader's attention in by being ambiguous or mysterious. Your topic sentence should clearly state what that paragraph is about. Likewise, you would have a clincher that wraps up that paragraph. Now, I've not seen this too much. I do think we broke the habit in 10th grade of this, but you should never end one paragraph trying to lead into the next. When you do that, you have this incomplete tone to your writing because each paragraph is its own building block to build your thesis. So we need to open it and then close it and then move to the next one. Speaking of which, because I just realized this is not my notes anywhere, avoid obvious transitions. You don't need to use words like firstly, furthermore, in conclusion. It's the last paragraph of your essay. Obviously, I know you're concluding. So avoid those obvious transitions and look to build sentences in ways to do that job for you. All right. Body paragraphs, topic, sentence, clincher, and in between, you are focused on a main idea, which gives you unity. You are writing about it in a way that your reader can follow. And that's what coherence means. The order of your ideas makes sense. And the great thing about the digital age is that we can click and drag around sentences as we revise our own writing in a way that makes it more coherent or makes more sense to our reader. And then, of course, you're going to see the idea. A lot of comments from me: needs development, needs support. Most of your support is going to be textual evidence, whether you're citing the text or just pulling specific details from the text to support what you've said, and that is elaboration. So all of that is what should be in every body paragraph for any essay you write, whether it's a 2 to 3 page essay like this one, or the 8 to 10 page one we'll finish the quarter with. Now, formal writing in general has some very specific rules that should be pretty inherent to you by now. I'm seeing some things in writing that are highly concerning, because not just because you guys are academic or DC, these just shouldn't be things that a 12th grader is still doing in their writing. I am seeing some things in advanced classes that make me question what would have happened if you guys took that writing SOL last year. So, and some folks did, but some of you guys didn't. And I'm glad, because we would have run into some problems. So, rules of formal writing. Number one, you never write in first person point of view unless you're specifically instructed otherwise. So I should never read an essay that's saying, I believe, I think, or we, or, I mean, you wrote it. It's obviously what you think, but you need to make all your statements third person objective. Okay, you need to avoid cliches, slang wording, a general conversational tone. And it's really, I guess what I'm seeing mostly is just the general word choice is too casual, that you should approach any essay that you write as formal writing. And so, when I'm seeing phrases like bad guys and, Grendel's mom, and they're just, think about every word that you're including, and is there a way to make it a more academic word choice? There should not be contractions anywhere in your writing. Now, the truth is that benefits you because it increases your word count. Do not becomes 2 words when don't was 1. However, as a general rule, you shouldn't have contractions in formal writing. And then this was your list of killer words that I'm seeing pop up a lot. Now, I will say in 10th grade, I said, do not use them, never use them. It was a point off every time you use them. I'm going to say now, be very reserved in using these words. If you are using the word really or very, it indicates a weak vocabulary. It means there was a better choice. If you are really hungry, you are ravenous. If someone is very ugly, they are hideous. So anytime you use one of those words, it denotes a weak vocabulary because you didn't know a better word to use. And when you have standardized testing, such as the written portion of the SAT or the SOL or anything like that, when they're scoring your Lexile score, which is how elevated your vocabulary is, words like that will cause you hits every time because it indicates weak writing. You should not use the word things or stuff. Those things or stuff always have a name. So call them what it is, because we always want to be specific in our writing. And when you use those words, you automatically lose specificity because you're not calling it what it actually is. And then get and got, just as word choices are pretty disruptive to the flow of writing. So there's typically a stronger, better verb to use. All right, I have some side notes here of the first set of essays that 12th graders have done. And here are some of the other issues that I saw that we're not going to spend extended time on. I do have a document I'm going to pull up with 3 of the most common problems and examples from your writing that we're going to fix to show you these are more general issues. All right. Never begin a paragraph or end a paragraph with a quote. That was something I saw far too much in the first set of papers. The only time you are using a quote from a text is to support the idea that you've already presented. So you need to present your idea or argument, support it with a quote, and then follow up by connecting or developing back to your original idea, or else your voice is lost. We've already read the text. We don't need to know what the text says. If you're including a quote from it, the only reason you're doing it is to support what you have said. So your voice needs to come first. So therefore you can't begin or end a paragraph with a quote, or you don't have an opportunity to introduce your argument or to make the development or connections after that you needed. Remember that you're only using the ellipses, which is only 3 dots, 3 periods, when you remove text. You don't need it at the beginning or ending of a quote. As I go back and revise this slide for next year, I'm going to add no questions. I've seen that popping up more and more, but when you have formal writing, you shouldn't have questions in it. This is your platform to present your information. Who are you asking questions to? I mean, we are rather utopian if we believe that someone reading our paper is going to pause and ask themselves this question and reflect upon it and then return to your paper. I promise you I'm not doing that. I don't have time. So whatever, if you find yourself wanting to include a question in your writing, because like as your brain's thinking it out, this is what you say, then just answer it in your writing instead. I definitely was highly disappointed that the title Beowulf was not noted as a title in any way in almost all of the essays. So if you have a title of a literary work, if it's a shorter piece of work, like a poem or short stories, it should be inside quotation marks. If it's a longer piece of work, such as a novel or a play, it should be underlined. But when you type, the default is if you italicize the title of a work, then you don't need the quotes or the underline, so you don't have to try to figure out which one it is. So anytime you're referring to Beowulf, the work, it should be italicized. Beowulf, the character, is not, but if you're referring to the epic poem Beowulf, it is a work of literature and it needs to be italicized. We're going to talk about citing quotes in the directions, and then this may have to end up being a larger lesson, but I'm going to see where it goes with this paper first. What I saw in the first set of papers were a lot of thesis statements that were either ambiguous or summative. And what's happening with the summative thesis is it's basically a thesis that says it exists. So First Block wrote a paper on looking at dichotomy in Beowulf. And so I had a handful of theses that were like, lightness and darkness is seen in Beowulf. Well, obviously it's seen because that's why it was a topic you could write about. So it's not a thesis to simply say it exists. That your thesis should always be presenting an argument that is unique, your view, and how your paper is going to prove it. So definitely keep that in mind, because if you open up with a thesis that is summative and you spend your paper showing that something simply exists, then you're going to end up summarizing throughout your entire paper, and it's just not going to end in a good grade. All right, so that is the overall. And then I did have this one sheet that I pulled some quotes right out of essays for us to look at. Now, if you find that you have works like, oh, that's from my paper, please do not stress. Number one, it was only after I came up with the idea to do this that I started pulling quotes. I only pulled quotes from like 2 or 3 different papers. And number two, I pulled these quotes because it was problems I kept seeing. So here are 3 pieces, the 3 biggest problems I saw that I wanted to address before the next paper. The first one's pronoun agreement. This is another one of those traits that should be inherent by now. That an occasional mistake may happen because sometimes correct grammar just sounds odd, right? And this can be one of those cases, but happening occasionally versus consistently is 2 different issues, and I'm seeing it consistently. So take a look at these 3 examples. Death is painful, especially when it is direct murder, which causes one to avenge the murder of their loved ones. So we have the pronouns one and their. It's problematic because one is singular and their is plural. So we cannot have a plural pronoun and a singular antecedent. So one or the other needs to change. So in this case, we could say, which causes family members to avenge the murders of their loved ones. And that would make it agree. Okay, so let's look at the second sentence. A protector is someone or something. So we've got one subject that protects the people they care about. So we can't have a plural pronoun for a singular subject. And someone who avenges gets revenge on someone or something that has done them wrong in some way. So again, our agreement here is off. So we need to either change the subject or the pronoun so they're both singular or they're both plural. Now, this is a sentence that I would be very careful with because it's so wordy. It makes it sound very generalized. So I think there's a good idea here, but we need to get rid of the wordiness so we can correct the grammar in it. So a correct way would do it would be a protector is someone who would be a better relative pronoun than that, protects the people he or she care about, and someone who avenges gets revenge on someone or something that has done that person wrong in some way. Now, again, that's a very wordy sentence, and I think a really good argument is lost in that wordiness. So I would suggest revising the sentence as a whole, but we're just looking at agreement right now. All right, and then lastly, the avenger is always someone who wants revenge for their wrongdoing. In this case, is Grendel's mother. So we have other issues there, but we're just looking at the agreement. So we could say the avenger, his or her, or we could say avengers are individuals who want revenge for their wrongdoing. So we need to have, again, subject and pronoun need to agree in whether they're singular or plural. So that's something I'm going to be looking for in this paper. The other problematic area that I'm surprised to see are run-on sentences. Again, this is something that by 12th grade, I just don't expect to see it anymore, especially because I know you all had Kingery for some amount of time, and this is like one of her things. So that I know there's certain things that Kingery really presses upon, and fragments and run-ons are high on that list. So I think many of these is the same thing happening with a comma splice. So Beowulf is a protector of the Geats and the Danes. He is sent out to kill the one who is causing all the pain to the people of Herat. So I have a complete sentence, comma, a complete sentence. It makes it a run-on sentence, specifically a comma splice. So we have a couple of things we could do here. Most simply, make that a period. We got two sentences, we're done. But I want to take this opportunity to address another issue that I've seen some, but not a lot yet. But this would be an example of how you properly use a semicolon. So the way that I'm seeing semicolons used is actually creating sentence fragments, because to use a semicolon, you've got a subject and predicate on one end and a subject and predicate on the other end, complete sentences on both sides of it, but they're so closely related that rather than separate them with a period, we use that semicolon to pause. So this would be an example of proper usage. Beowulf killed and defeated Grendel and avenged for the death of all the warriors. He killed Grendel to protect the remaining people of Herat. Exact same thing happening here. So we could put one of our fanboys in here. We could add a conjunction to join the ideas together. But at the very least, we can't have a comma trying to hold together two complete sentences, or else we have run-on sentences. And in this case, we don't even have that. Grendel does not just slay the people of Herat, he conquers a place for himself. These are two complete sentences, but we could say, comma, but he also, so if we add but also a compound conjunction, there, we now have a complex sentence, same statement, written well, elevates your writing. So run-on sentences, we need to get those out of our writing. Now, this third and final issue we're going to look at, this I did expect, and this is where I really was hoping to spend more of our time, other than these other little things that I didn't expect to see so much in the writing of our highest level of high school English classes. Have I impressed upon that enough? All right, so quote integration was horrible, but I expected it, and that's okay. So there wasn't, I made lots of comments about you need to integrate your quotes better and gave people examples of how to do it. And that's why I want to spend just a couple of minutes here looking at this, because I expect it to be better in the next set of papers. So remember first what I said earlier, that you're only including quotes to revisit ideas you've presented. So they can't speak for you, but they can support the argument you put forth. So there's always a 1, 2, and 3 anytime you use quotes. There's a Schmook video that I think we'll watch before we do the big paper that talks about the Oreo method. But you need to introduce your argument, use the quote to support the argument you've already introduced, and then follow up with connection or development back to your argument. So your voice is always central to your paper. So let's look at these examples, and I don't know that we're going to go all 6 of them, but just a few of them to get an idea of how this could have been better written. All right, the way Beowulf saw it was, now Grendel and I are called together, and I've come, grant me then, Lord and protector of this noble place. This quote offers more than just what it says. Beowulf wanted to be the protector to prove himself, not just to protect the people. And okay, so this was an easy fix. So number 1, let's properly cite it. We need to have a space, and we don't need the word lines. And then punctuation comes after. So proper quote citation is important for this paper that's due next week. Because it's a shared text, we're all working with the same text. We don't need page number, we don't need author, things we would need in a larger paper. All we need are the line numbers being quoted. Here's where this becomes problematic. This whole little phrase here, This quote offers more than just what it says. So you just made your entire argument about this quote. So your idea is lost. We don't care why you're using it or what you said, but it's all about what's in the book. The fix for it is simply this. Get rid of that. Here's a quote. I mean, I'm guessing you would have a sentence before that introduced it. Here's a quote. And I mean, and it's well integrated here. And then just follow up by saying what you need to say. You don't need to say, this quote says this. Just state what your argument is. Or again, your argument's lost and we're now just looking at this quote. All right. So then she went to take a life to avenge the loss of her son. She had carried off Grendel's claw. Sorrow had returned to Denmark. They traded death, stains, and monsters. No one both had lost. All right, citation's good. To me, this is fragmented. Let me get rid of that space. She went to take a life to avenge for the loss of her son. There's nothing to transition to this quote. So what we've done is we've actually created a run-on sentence here. There's no quote integration. This is a complete sentence. This is a complete sentence. So we need work. So the way that I would revise this to make it an integrated quote is maybe to say this instead. Grendel's mother, I'm sorry, when I type and I've got to say it out loud, avenges the death of her son when she, okay, and I'm going to change the verb tense. And anytime you make a change inside of a quote so that it flows better, you got to put parentheses so we know it was changed. So Grendel's mother avenges the death of her son when she carries off Grendel's claw. So now it's a much more, that's an integrated quote. It's fluid, it's a complete sentence, but where's the argument? The argument was that claw becomes a symbol for the vengeance, the purpose of her attack. The voice is still mine, the writer. I would follow it up explaining that, but that is more how you integrate quotes. Okay, so let me pick one more that might be fixed a different way. All right, so let's look at this one here because this is a simple one. So I don't know what came before this one. We're looking at the second one here. But we have a very simple quote, well cited. And then we have this, again, these are different papers. I keep seeing this in the writing. This quote, blah, blah, blah. We're not writing about quotes. You are writing about the text and you're using this quote to support your argument. So in the way that this is formulated, I've just given the author the voice of my paper. So I'm going to take it back simply by doing this. So let's say the community between groups of men is shown when, bam, when the Danes visiting the Greeks celebrate, blah, blah, blah. So simple fix, right? But do you see the difference in tone? Because it's now my argument. That quote's working for me. I own this paper. And I'm not just summarizing what happened, but I'm saying, here's my argument, here's my support. So think about that as you're including quotes through the essay you're writing for next week. And just make sure that your voice stays central and you're only using quotes. You should have some quotes. And my rule of thumb is typically you should never have more than one quote per paragraph, and not every paragraph needs quotes. I would say, and maybe even at 1.5 quotes per page. So if your essay is 2 pages, you shouldn't have more than 3 quotes. So you want to make them meaningful, because otherwise you can just state parts of a story without quoting it. All right, so let's go back. Let's stop the general talk and let's go and actually look at this assignment. Resume share. Okay, I don't want to share this anymore. I want to come over here and share this. Give me just new share. There we go. I'm sorry. I'm so used to Schoology that Zoom is like a foreign language now. All right. So also in this folder though is this second link here, which is a friend to you, because all essays need to be MLA format. We are not rewinding the clock to walk through what MLA format is. So anything you possibly need to know about MLA format is going to be on this link. So when you get to your research paper, this will help you cite inside your research. Here's basic formatting. 12 point times New Roman double space is the basic foundation that you have been taught and should be using. And then if you come down here, it even has, here's a sample heading. Your essay should always have a heading and a title. So all of this can be found on that link that I have included for you in the writing resources folder. So saw too many papers first time around that were not MLA format. It's going to cause you deductions this time. So make sure you're viewing that. All right, but let's get to this paper, because I really was not trying to keep you any longer than needed, but want to give you the opportunity to get as great a grade as possible. So everyone has this first sheet and it says essay directions. So let's see here. You guys are going to my DC class. You will choose a prompt. My academic class, your prompt has been given to you. You are writing an essay that is 500 to 750 words, which is 2 to 3 pages. You may use the text. So it refers to class textbook, because this is typically, I think, well, you see, if you look, it's an in-class essay. So the way the assignment is typically given is the day you come in, you get 2 handouts. One has the directions, one has the prompts, and this is due within 1 class period. So unlike so much else that we are doing, this is an assignment that is actually greatly benefited by the virtual environment, in that you have more time to marinate on your ideas, and look up textual evidence and really support and develop them. So when it refers to textbooks, it's referring to, in your case, the PDF I've uploaded, refer to the text. You also can refer back to any work you have done for this unit. So you have discussion boards on dichotomy and on religious illusions. You have the slideshow on an epic hero, which are the 3 different prompts. And then you have questions you've answered. So you may not use work added by someone else, such as on your discussion board group, but you can go back and reference anything that you have already done to bring it into this. But there may be no external sources used. If there's any evidence that you've gone out on the internet and try to find someone else's answers to these questions, it's not going to really help you, because these are very unique prompts that I developed based on how we worked with Beowulf. But any use of external sources does result in a 0. So let me make that clearly evident. Okay, next bullet, so important. And you're going to see on the prompt sheets, I've highlighted this in every single prompt, because this ends up being the biggest problem with this essay. It is important that you cover all 3 battles in whatever your thesis is for your chosen prompt. Now, do you need to give them equal airtime? No. So you might focus more on 1 or 2 battles and then show how the 3rd one connects. But you do need to include all 3 battles in the argument you propose for your thesis. Make sure you have an evident introduction and conclusion. To say there's no cookie cutter format is because you're talking about 3 battles, people often write what I call the cookie cutter 5-paragraph essay. And it goes introduction, battle 1, battle 2, battle 3, conclusion. The huge danger in doing that is it pushes you toward summary, that you just end up talking about what happened in the story, where it is a much stronger idea that here's your thesis and here are the 3 arguments or 4 or 5 arguments of how you're going to break it down to support that thesis. So like, for example, if you were going to work with the motivation of Beowulf, it would be a stronger essay to write, the ways in which glorification and honor motivated him versus the way in which material wealth motivated him versus the way in which other people in the story, whether Wiglaf or Hrothgar, motivated him. That will be a strong essay. It would be a weaker essay to write his motivation in battle 1 versus his motivation in battle 2 versus his motivation in battle 3. Can you write an essay that way? Can it do an okay job? Sure. But in doing that, you run the risk of just, again, summarizing what happened in each battle. So the topics of your essay are not battle 1, battle 2, battle 3. The topics of your essay are, once you pick a thesis, how are you breaking that down into different arguments? So, and I will tell you, this and this alone will be the way I know who watched this video, because the more papers I get that are 5-paragraph essays, battle 1, battle 2, battle 3, I'm going to know either you just didn't heed my warning or you didn't watch this video. Because what will happen with this essay is I respect the struggle. So the effort you make to write a harder essay, by doing this, have a chance of getting a stronger grade than writing a real basic, simple essay that just walks you through what happened in a story. That could get a good C, but I don't think many of you are aiming for C's. All right, next bullet. It is a thesis-driven essay. My first set of essays, I had a handful that had no thesis. No thesis means no essay. You just it's just a written response to something. So, and I would say there is no black and white rule that your thesis statement needs to be the last sentence of your introduction paragraph. But my feeling is overall, we're at a place in our writing where we need to go ahead and say that. So let's make the thesis the last sentence of the introduction paragraph. As the semester goes on, that might not always be the case, because for elevated writing it's not. But we're not there yet. So I should be able to look at, this is what I should be able to do with your paper when I get it. I should be able to look at the final sentence of your introduction to see your thesis, and then look at the first sentence of each body paragraph to see how you're going to prove that thesis. If I can do that, you got a strong paper. Okay, do remember it is argumentative. So you're simply not going to give me a thesis that says it happened. Beowulf is an epic hero through battles. Okay, that's why it's a prompt. But what is your argument specific to your paper and each of those body paragraphs going to prove? All right, quoting, we have talked about. Here's your citation example. So even those of you who aren't watching this, who won't hear me say this anyway, it is here in writing. If things aren't cited properly, I'm taking a 10-point deduction. You lost a letter grade. We don't want to do that. So quote, space, line numbers, punctuation afterwards. Got it? Okay. So those are the directions for everyone. So coming back into this folder, I'm now going to move to the prompt sheet. Okay, so in my DC class, you've got 3 prompts to choose from. If you are my Block 2 class, you won't see this sheet, but when you open your Google form for the assignment, it's going to have this first prompt here. So we're going to talk about the first prompt, and then I'll cut you guys free, like I said, while I look at the other 2 with the DCs. So if we were to go to Google and we were to say, what is an epic hero? This is the definition that Google gives. A brave and noble character in an epic poem, admired for great achievements or affected by grand events. Beowulf, an epic hero with extraordinary strength. That is a definition in Google. So do you agree? Does Beowulf fit the true definition of an epic hero, or has he become a generalized example based on the excerpts of his story known to the common population? Because just like we're going to see with Frankenstein, just like we're going to see with some other things we work with, a lot of people think they know a story when they don't really know what happened. You guys know still only a portion of Beowulf, but the ways in which he changed throughout these battles. So you're going to choose one side of the argument or the other. Using the definitions we referenced in class for epic hero, does he deserve this title? So you can go back to, I think it's at the top of the second page of your text, where it goes into what an epic hero is. And then you have that original slideshow that talks a little bit about an epic hero. Those are the traits you're using. So again, you're not going out and Googling epic hero, because even though it does mention Beowulf, it's going to have a lot more than what we dealt with. So you need to pick a stance. Either he is or is not. You must stay consistent in your stance. So you cannot argue he is an epic hero in battle 1 and battle 2, but not in battle 3 because of this. So you have to figure out an argument that you can carry through 3 battles. And as I've already said, all 3 battles need to be present in your paper. I strongly suggest not doing it in that narrative chronological time frame, but finding ways to break. I mean, the traits are an easy way to break it down, right? Kind of like what you did with the slideshow. Let's take the 3 traits of an epic hero and discuss the ways in which he does or does not meet them. And in discussing it, I've covered Grendel's mom and the dragon somewhere in the paper. That's a strong way to write this. All right, so that is the first option for an essay topic. And then for my academics, that is your essay. So if you are one of my Block 2 students tuned into this video, you guys can go ahead and tune out and get started, because I'm going to talk about the next 2 topics, which are not of your world. And then remember, this is due Wednesday at noon. We will meet back in class on Wednesday, and we're moving on. We're looking at some new poems, really short readings, and no paper for the next unit, but the test is a little more involved. We'll talk about that then. All right, so for my DC kids, I will tell you this. I will use a phrase often that I respect the struggle, and it is very true in these papers. So that first topic about Beowulf as the epic hero is the easy paper to write, which means I am looking for like one heck of a paper. So if you're doing that first paper, I mean, you need to have an idea that is original. It just needs to be a really strong essay, because I feel like it's one we've talked about so much. It's one that's just almost evident in the writing it. And again, it's one that I'm giving to the classes that are academically lower than you. So obviously it is the easier prompt. However, I'm still leaving it on the table as a choice for you. Just realize if that's the choice you take, you need to make sure that you've invested some serious time into blowing my mind with it. That being said, here are your other 2 topics. They should look really familiar because it's what we've worked with. So we worked with dichotomy in book 2 in the second battle, and we worked with religious influence in the first battle. So you're going to revisit those ideas, and you're going to do it across all 3. So dichotomy would be the essay that I just graded and gave feedback to you guys on. And then religious influence, we only did the discussion board on. But again, you can reference back to any work that you have done as kind of a starting point for these essays. So let's see here. I did not pre-read these, I'll be honest with you. So dichotomy, human nature is drawn to conflict. As a result, many great works of literature use dichotomy to build a narrative. Remember, to analyze dichotomy, you need to not only consider the 2 binary opposites, but focus on the static that exists between these opposing forces. For example, to analyze the presence of light and darkness, and this is, I did not see this in the dichotomy essay enough. So keep in mind with this essay that you're going into, that you need to use one to describe the other. And so here are your choices. You can look at civilized versus primitive, courage versus fear, powerful versus weak, or honorable versus dishonorable. And you need to have examples from all three battles. But again, I would look for ways to group them together that is not in battle one, battle two, battle three. But in order to analyze dichotomy, make sure you're doing this. I only saw this successfully done in a few essays. So let's take honorable and dishonorable, for example, that make sure that you include the ways in which looking at those who were dishonorable further accentuate the honorability of those who were. So these characters demonstrated the value of honor when they did this, but the actions of these dishonorable characters in comparison further shows how honorable these characters are, because that's how you work with dichotomy, okay? And again, the biggest issue I saw with dichotomy essay that I didn't expect was folks were arguing it exists. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you, these all exist. That's why these are options. So you do not need to write an essay that says Grendel is primitive and Beowulf is civilized. Okay, we know this, but what is the message evoked to the audience from this? So this is you've worked with this some, and because of that, it might you might have a pathway in, but this is definitely one that you're going to have to wrap your head around a little bit and figure it out. But it's an essay that when it's done is a good, strong essay. And it's one that's very wrapped up in the analysis. All right, then your third choice is religious influence. So to approach analyzing the religious influence in Beowulf, you are not giving examples of where this occurs. The examples are too abundant to adequately address them in such a limited essay. Instead, you are extracting examples from the three sections of the narrative to consider how the influence of transcription changes the narrative. What effect does it have? Does it overpower the conflict and plot development, or change Beowulf as a character in a way that would be different without its inclusion in the text? So what that's referring to is you could look at ways in which Beowulf's victory is expressed as glory to God. And so had we not had that, in what ways does it change the narrative of him as a hero? And that could be, you can argue it both ways, right? You could look at the way when he has favor, and then the way in which it says he does not have favor. Now, are you going to pull quotes from the text to support it? Yes. But it's not like what we did. Here's an allusion, explain what it is. How does it affect the text? Here's an allusion, explain what. You're not doing it like that. But you're going to look at the overall idea that obviously we know there's a religious influence to the text. So what you are analyzing in your writing is, in what way does it overall affect the text, and how will the text be different without it? All right. So how is the theme that emerges from Beowulf directly tied to the influence of Christianity in translation? So that is a theme that you're identifying. So what do you think the overall idea or message from Beowulf is? How does that tie to religion? And if that religious influence was taken away, what then happens to that theme? Got it? So prompt 2 and prompt 3 are more difficult prompts. Because of that, me reading them, I'm expecting some struggle in there, but I'm expecting to see some original ideas. You guys really trying to prove something that is your own idea, and I'm going to respect the struggle is happening. So that is where we're at. I really hope it's not Tuesday night and you're like fast forwarding through this and trying to get some ideas to get started on it, because marination time is good. Give yourself a day, hopefully this weekend, just be thinking about ideas and which one connects to you. Which one do you have this idea like, God, could I prove that? I don't know how to state this. I don't know how to wrap this up in words. Like, I have this idea, but I don't know how to say it to you. And then spend some time teasing that out before you jump into your paper. All right. So I'm sure I have rambled on longer than you need me to give you everything you need to make this a very meaningful and what was my other word? Concise, maybe not so concise, tutorial. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys' papers on Wednesday and seeing you back in class on Wednesday. And I am looking as forward to you as you probably are to moving beyond Beowulf. Have a great weekend. I'll see you guys next week.